The explosion ripped through the convoy with devastating force, turning armored vehicles into twisted metal coffins and sending bodies flying through the smoke-filled air. When the dust settled and enemy fighters moved through the wreckage, celebrating their ambush, they counted 7 American casualties, including Staff Sergeant Isabella Taylor, the intelligence analyst they had specifically targeted. They photographed her dog tags, claimed victory on their propaganda channels, and assumed the threat was eliminated. What they didn't know was that Isabella had survived with a concussion, broken ribs, and a fury that would fuel the next 72 hours. The explosion hit at 0847 hours. Staff Sergeant Isabella Taylor had been reviewing intelligence reports in the 3rd vehicle of a 7-vehicle convoy moving through the Helmand province when the world turned into fire and chaos. The lead vehicle hit an IED buried in the road, a massive explosion that sent the armored truck flipping through the air. Before anyone could react, RPG fire came from both sides of the canyon, perfectly coordinated to trap the convoy in the kill zone. Isabella's vehicle took an RPG directly to the engine block. The explosion threw her against the interior wall with brutal force. She felt ribs crack, her head slam against metal, and then everything went black for seconds or minutes. She couldn't tell. When consciousness returned, the vehicle was on its side, flames spreading from the engine, and the distinctive crack of AK-47 fire echoed through the canyon. Through the smoke and her blurred vision, she could see shapes moving, enemy fighters approaching the destroyed convoy. Her training kicked in through the pain and disorientation. She had to move now. Isabella forced herself through the shattered rear door, falling onto sand that was already soaked with blood from soldiers who hadn't survived the initial attack. She could hear enemy fighters shouting, their voices celebrating the successful ambush. She crawled toward a cluster of rocks about 30 meters from the destroyed convoy, every movement sending lightning bolts of pain through her broken ribs. Her left arm wasn't working properly, a probably dislocated shoulder adding to her injuries. But she kept moving, using rocks and destroyed equipment for cover, leaving a blood trail she desperately hoped the smoke would hide. Behind her, enemy fighters were moving through the wreckage, executing wounded soldiers and looting bodies. She heard the distinctive double tap of execution shots and fought down the rage and horror, threatening to overwhelm her tactical thinking. One fighter approached the vehicle Isabella had escaped from. Through gaps in the rocks, she watched him examine the wreckage, then pull something from inside. Her tactical vest with her dog tags? He held them up triumphantly, shouting something to his companions. They thought she was dead. The vest had blood on it, probably hers, maybe from the soldier who had been sitting next to her. The fighter took photos with a cell phone, documenting the kill for propaganda purposes. Isabella remained absolutely motionless behind the rocks, controlling her breathing despite the pain as enemy fighters celebrated their victory less than 50 meters away. She counted them. 14 fighters total, organized and well-equipped with modern weapons and tactical gear. This wasn't random insurgents. This was a trained unit that had planned this ambush specifically. After 20 minutes of looting and photographing, the destroyed convoy, the enemy fighters withdrew toward the canyon walls where vehicles were hidden. They drove away in 2 trucks, leaving the burning American vehicles and 7 bodies behind. Isabella waited another 30 minutes after they left, making sure there were no stragglers or observers, before forcing herself to move. She crawled back to the convoy wreckage, searching for anything useful she could carry. She found a rifle, an M4 carbine with 2 magazines still intact, a tactical knife, a first aid kit, and most importantly, a radio that had somehow survived the destruction, though it was badly damaged. She also found Captain Rodriguez, her convoy commander, barely alive beneath an overturned vehicle. He had taken shrapnel across his torso and was bleeding badly. "Taylor," he gasped when he saw her, "thought you were dead." "Saw them take your tags. Stay still, sir. I'm getting you stabilized." Isabella applied pressure bandages from the first aid kit, knowing it probably wasn't enough but unable to do nothing. "They're coming back," Rodriguez whispered, blood on his lips. "Heard them talking on radio frequencies. They're coming back at nightfall to make sure everyone's dead and take the weapons." "How long do we have?" A few hours, maybe 6. Rodriguez grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Isabella, listen. This wasn't random. They targeted us. The intelligence about enemy positions you reported yesterday. Someone leaked it. That's how they knew our route. Isabella felt ice in her stomach. Who? Don't know, Rodriguez coughed. More blood coming, but someone wants your intel dead. You're the targeting analyst. You know too much about their operations. They wanted you specifically. Sir, I'm going to get you out of here. No, Rodriguez's voice was firm despite his condition. You can't carry me and survive, but you can make them pay. You know, their compound locations, their leadership structure, everything. He pressed something into her hand, a flash drive. Intel from your office, everything you compiled about their network. Use it. Hunt them. Make them regret they didn't check if you were actually dead. Survive, report what happened. And make those bastards pay for my Marines. Rodriguez's eyes were losing focus. Go. Now, before they come back. Isabella wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She couldn't carry him with her injuries, and staying meant both of them dying when the fighters returned. I'll make them pay, sir, I promise. Rodriguez nodded slightly and closed his eyes. Give them hell, Isabella. She took the flash drive, her rifle, the supplies she could carry, and moved into the desert before grief could paralyze her. She had maybe 6 hours before enemy fighters returned, and she needed to be far away and hidden before then. Her concussion made the world tilt and spin. Her ribs sent stabbing pain with every breath. Her shoulder screamed with every movement. But she kept walking, using the sun for navigation, heading toward a ridgeline 3 kilometers away where she could find cover and evaluate her. Situation. She reached the ridge as the sun was setting, finding a cave formation that provided concealment. From this position, she could see the destroyed convoy in the distance, a column of black smoke marking where 7 Americans had died. As darkness fell, she saw headlights approaching the convoy site. The enemy fighters had returned as Rodriguez had predicted, their vehicles' lights visible as they moved through the wreckage, presumably to collect weapons and confirm all the Americans were dead. Isabella pulled out the damaged radio and worked on it using techniques she had learned during survival training. After an hour of careful work, she managed to get brief, intermittent power, not enough for sustained communication, but maybe enough for a short burst transmission. She composed a message using brevity codes, then waited for the radio to show enough power for transmission. At 2,130 hours, she sent her message. Bravo 7 actual Kiar, convoy destroyed, grid NV 425789, survivor 0 except Taylor, ambush targeted, intel compromised, enemy compound locations confirmed, commencing direct action, Taylor out. The radio died completely after the transmission. She didn't know if anyone had received it. She examined the flash drive Rodriguez had given her. It contained all the intelligence she had compiled over 6 months, detailed locations of enemy safe houses, leadership profiles, supply routes, and most importantly, the compound where the ambush had been planned. Isabella had been an intelligence analyst for 4 years, trained to find patterns in massive amounts of data and identify high-value targets for special operations units. But she had also completed advanced combat training, survival courses, and specialized in small unit tactics, training most intelligence personnel never received because they weren't expected to conduct operations. Tonight, that was going to change. She spent the next 4 hours planning. She had limited ammunition, 2 M4 magazines plus whatever she could scavenge. No support, no backup, and significant injuries that would slow her down and possibly kill her if she pushed too hard. But she had intelligence that told her exactly where to find the people responsible for killing her team. And she had rage that turned her injuries into background noise she could compartmentalize and ignore. Her first target was obvious, the compound 3 kilometers northeast where the ambush had been planned. According to her intelligence, it housed the local Taliban commander Khalid Nazari and his inner circle of about 15 fighters. They would be celebrating tonight, posting their propaganda photos, claiming victory, planning their next attack. They thought the threat was eliminated. They were wrong. Isabella moved through the darkness using night vision goggles she had salvaged from the convoy, moving slowly to minimize noise and manage her injuries. The compound came into view around midnight, a fortified structure with mud walls, guard towers, and vehicles parked outside. She observed from 200 meters distance, counting guards and mapping their patrol patterns. 6 external guards rotating every 2 hours, lights and voices from inside suggesting a large gathering, probably the celebration Rodriguez had predicted. She had 2 choices: wait for a better tactical situation or strike while they were concentrated. And less alert, waiting meant her injuries might deteriorate. Striking meant facing overwhelming odds. Isabella chose violence. She positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the compound's main entrance. Through her rifle scope, she could see guards clearly, undisciplined, talking instead of watching their sectors, weapons slung casually. At 0245 hours, she began. Her first shot dropped the guard in the north tower, a clean head shot at 180 meters that he never saw coming. She immediately transitioned to the south tower guard, dropping him before the first body hit the ground. The other 4 guards took several seconds to realize they were under fire. Critical seconds Isabella used to eliminate 2 more with precision. Shots. The final 2 guards ran for the compound entrance, shouting warnings. Isabella hit one in the back as he ran. The second made it inside and sealed the gate. Now they knew someone was attacking, but they didn't know how many or from where. Isabella heard shouting from inside the compound, saw lights coming on, heard engines starting. She moved positions immediately, a basic sniper principle being never to fire more than a few shots from the same location. She repositioned 100 meters to the east, finding a new firing position with a better angle on the compound's rear exit. As predicted, fighters began emerging from the rear gate, trying to flank what they assumed was the attack position. Isabella engaged them as they emerged, precise shots dropping 3 fighters before the others scrambled back inside. Now they were trapped, afraid to leave but knowing someone was outside picking them off. This was psychological warfare as much as combat. Isabella waited. Her concussion was making her vision blur slightly, but she forced herself to maintain focus. After 20 minutes, a pickup truck with a mounted machine gun burst from the front gate at high speed. The gunner firing wildly in multiple directions, trying to suppress the unknown attacker. Isabella aimed not at the gunner but at the driver, 1 shot through the windshield. The technical swerved violently and crashed into the compound wall. She fired 3 more rounds rapidly, 1 hitting the fuel tank. The technical exploded in a fireball that lit up the compound and the surrounding area. In the light from the burning vehicle, Isabella saw figures moving inside the compound, fighters, positioning for defense. She counted at least 8 still alive, probably more inside the main building. She couldn't assault the compound directly with her injuries and limited ammunition, but she didn't need to. She had already achieved her objective, creating chaos and fear among fighters who thought they were safe. As dawn approached, Isabella withdrew before they could organize a proper search. She had struck the first blow, eliminating approximately 7 enemy fighters and destroying their sense of security. But more importantly, she had sent a message. You're being hunted. Over the next 48 hours, Isabella struck 3 more locations from her intelligence files. She hit a supply cache at dawn, destroying ammunition and weapons with improvised explosives she created from material scavenged during her movements. She eliminated 4 guards without firing a shot, using her knife and silent takedowns learned in training. She struck a meeting site that afternoon, waiting until 5 Taliban leaders gathered to discuss the mysterious attacks, eliminating 3 with precision rifle fire before the survivors scattered. She attacked a checkpoint that night using hit-and-run tactics to eliminate 6 fighters and destroy 2 vehicles before vanishing into the darkness like the ghost they had claimed to have killed. Word spread through the Taliban network. An American was hunting them. Some said it was a special forces team. Others whispered it was the intelligence analyst they had claimed to kill in the convoy ambush, returned from the dead to exact revenge. The truth was more terrifying than the rumors. Isabella was using every technique she had learned during her career. signals intelligence to intercept their communications, pattern analysis to predict where targets would be, and combat skills to execute with ruthless efficiency. She was also paying the price physically. Her concussion caused constant headaches and occasional vision problems. Her broken ribs made breathing agonizing. Her dislocated shoulder limited her mobility. She was operating on minimal sleep, surviving on scavenged food and water, treating her injuries with basic first aid that barely kept infection at bay. But she kept hunting. On the third night, she received unexpected help. A patrol of U.S. Marines stumbled upon evidence of her attacks, destroyed vehicles and dead fighters that clearly bore signs of American military tactics. They had been sent to investigate after her brief radio transmission had been received and decoded. Isabella observed them from hiding, confirming they were genuinely American forces and not a trap, then made contact, appearing from cover with her rifle lowered, identifying herself and explaining what had happened. The Marine captain, a young officer named Williams, stared at her in disbelief. "Staff Sergeant Taylor, we received reports you were killed in the convoy ambush 3 days ago. Intelligence shows Taliban posted photos of your dog tags claiming you were dead." "They were premature," Isabella replied flatly. "I need medical attention, resupply, and then I need to finish what I started." Williams looked at her, covered in blood and dust, obviously injured but carrying captured enemy weapons and moving with lethal purpose. "Ma'am, you need immediate evacuation. You're clearly wounded. I'm not leaving until the leadership responsible for that ambush is eliminated. I have intelligence on their location." She pulled out the flash drive. "Everything is here. Give me a fire team in 24 hours and we can end their entire network." William started to argue, but something in Isabella's eyes stopped him. He had seen that look before in Marines who had lost their entire unit and wanted one thing: revenge, tempered with professional precision. "Let me call this up the chain," William said. "But I'm betting command is going to want you extracted immediately." He was right. Within hours, orders came down. Isabella was to be evacuated to base for medical treatment and debriefing. Her intelligence would be used to plan future operations, but she was explicitly forbidden from participating due to her injuries and the questionable legality of her 3-day unauthorized direct action campaign. Isabella listened to the orders, nodded politely, and then calmly explained she was going after Khalid Nazari, the Taliban commander who had planned the convoy ambush tonight with or without permission. "Ma'am, I can't authorize that," William said carefully. "I'm not asking for authorization. I'm informing you of my intentions. Court-martial me later if you want, but that convoy had 7 Marines who died following my intelligence." "They died because someone leaked our route? Nazari planned that ambush. I have coordinates for his current location. I'm going alone if necessary." The Marine captain looked at his sergeant, then back at Isabella. Finally he spoke. "You're going to get me court-martialed too." "All right, we'll back your play, but we're doing this smart and by the numbers." What followed was a rapid planning session combining Isabella's intelligence with the Marine Patrol's combat capability. Nazari was at a fortified compound 10 kilometers north, a location Isabella had been planning to hit when the Marine Patrol found her. They moved out at 2,200 hours, Isabella, Captain Williams, and 8 Marines. The plan was simple. The Marines would breach and clear the compound while Isabella provided overwatch and targeting intelligence, but as they approached the target, Isabella's radio intercepted enemy communications. Nazari had received warning about the attack and was evacuating to a backup location in the mountains. They had maybe 30 minutes before he escaped. "We'll never catch him at the backup location," Williams said grimly. "It's too fortified and we don't have the forces to assault it." "There's another way," Isabella replied, studying her intelligence files on the flash drive. "His escape route goes through a narrow canyon, single road, no alternate paths. If, we can position there before he arrives, we've got him trapped." It was a desperate gamble. Reaching the canyon before Nazari's convoy while the team was already exhausted from their movement, but the alternative was letting him escape. They moved at double time, pushing through exhaustion and pain. Isabella's ribs felt like they were tearing with every breath, but she maintained pace with the Marines. They reached the canyon with minutes to spare. Isabella positioned herself on a ridge with a clear view of the road while the Marines set up positions to block escape routes. Vehicle lights appeared in the darkness. Nazari's convoy. 3 vehicles, probably 15 fighters total, heavily armed and moving fast. Isabella's scope settled on the lead vehicle. Through the night vision she could see the passenger clearly. Khalid Nazari himself, recognizable from intelligence photos. The man who had planned the ambush that killed her team. "Target confirmed," she transmitted. "Engaging." Her shot shattered the lead vehicle's windshield, killing the driver. The vehicle swerved and crashed. The convoy stopped, fighters pouring out and taking cover, returning fire blindly into the darkness. The Marines engaged from their positions, creating a devastating crossfire that the Taliban fighters couldn't escape. It was over in 3 minutes. Every enemy fighter was eliminated, vehicles destroyed. Nazari had survived the initial crash with injuries. The Marines secured him, calling in medical evacuation for a high-value prisoner who would provide intelligence about Taliban. Networks dot as helicopters arrived to evacuate the wounded prisoner and transport the Marine patrol back to base. Isabella stood looking at the destroyed convoy, a mirror image of the ambush that had started this 3-day hunt. Captain Williams approached her. "Hell of a thing, Staff Sergeant. You just conducted a one-woman campaign that eliminated approximately 30 enemy combatants and captured their regional commander. I've never seen anything like it." Isabella looked at him with exhausted eyes. They thought I was just another casualty. Another statistic, another intelligence analyst who couldn't fight. She paused, looking at the destroyed Taliban convoy. "But I survived, and I made them pay for every Marine in that convoy. For Captain Rodriguez, for every soldier they killed thinking we'd just accept it." Williams nodded. "You became their ghost story. The American they thought they'd killed, coming back to hunt them. They'll be talking about you for years." Isabella managed a thin smile despite her exhaustion and pain. "Good, let them talk. Let them know what happens when you underestimate the people you're fighting. When you think killing is easy and consequences are someone else's problem." She looked up at the helicopters overhead. "They learned different. I survived. I hunted. I finished it." 3 weeks later, after medical treatment and extensive debriefing, Isabella was called to the command headquarters. She expected disciplinary action for her unauthorized operations. Instead, she found herself facing a room of senior officers who had reviewed her actions. The colonel in charge looked at her seriously. "Staff Sergeant Taylor, your 3-day unauthorized direct action campaign violated approximately 15 different regulations and could technically be grounds for court-martial." Isabella stood at attention. "Yes, sir, I understand. However," the colonel continued, "your actions also eliminated a significant portion of enemy leadership, disrupted their operations across an entire province, led to the capture of a high-value target, and avenged the deaths of 7 American service members. The intelligence community wants you for a specialized position. Special Operations Command wants to recruit you, and I've been asked to inform you that your actions are being reviewed for commendation rather than punishment." He paused. "But I need to know, would you do it again? Conduct unauthorized operations while wounded, without support, in direct violation of orders?" Isabella considered carefully before answering. "Sir, I hope I'm never in that situation again. But if enemy forces kill my team and think they've won because they didn't check thoroughly enough, if they celebrate before confirming the kill, then yes, sir, I'd do it again. Because they need to learn that Americans don't quit just because you think you've beaten us." The colonel actually smiled. "That's what I thought you'd say. Congratulations, Staff Sergeant. You're being transferred to a joint task force that specializes in exactly the kind of operations you conducted, intelligence-driven direct action against high-value targets. You'll receive advanced training, proper support, and legal authorization for what you did on your own." Isabella felt something loosen in her chest, not quite relief, but acknowledgement that her actions had purpose beyond revenge. "Thank you." Sir, when do I start? After you complete medical recovery. Your body took serious damage during those 3 days. Take the time to heal properly. He handed her a folder. Let's start reviewing these files. Your next targets won't assume you're dead. They'll know you're coming, and that makes them far more dangerous. 6 months later, Isabella was fully recovered and operating with a specialized unit that combined intelligence analysis with direct action. She had become exactly what her enemies had feared during those 3 days, a hunter who used information as a weapon more devastating than any rifle. She trained other intelligence analysts in combat skills, teaching them that understanding the enemy meant being able to confront them directly when necessary. She led operations that eliminated threats before they could materialize into attacks on American forces. And every time she went into combat, she remembered the convoy ambush, the teammates she had lost, and the 3 days she had spent proving that declaring victory too early was the worst mistake an enemy could make. 1 year after the convoy ambush, Isabella returned to the exact location where her team had died. A memorial had been erected, 7 names carved into stone, including Captain Rodriguez. She stood before it in full combat gear, having just completed a mission eliminating the last remaining members of the network responsible for the ambush. A young intelligence analyst from her unit approached. "Ma'am, the local Taliban are saying this area is haunted. They claim the ghost of an American soldier still hunts here. They refuse to operate within 10 kilometers of this location." Isabella smiled slightly, touching Rodriguez's name on the memorial. "Good, let them believe in ghosts. Let them fear the dark and wonder if every shadow hides someone they failed to kill." She turned to face her unit. "They teach you in training that intelligence work is safe, that you analyze from a distance while others fight. But Captain Rodriguez taught me something different in his last moments. He taught me that when your team dies because of intelligence failures or enemy action, you don't just write reports. You make them pay. You prove that Americans don't stay dead just because you want them to." She looked back at the memorial. 7 warriors died here, but their legacy lived on through 3 days when one survivor refused to accept defeat. When one ghost hunted the hunters until justice was served. The analyst nodded in understanding. "They thought you were just another casualty." "They were wrong," Isabella replied quietly. "And 30 dead enemy fighters learned that lesson too late. I survived. I hunted, and I made sure everyone responsible understood the price of underestimating American warriors." She saluted the memorial. 7 names, 7 Marines who would never be forgotten, whose deaths had been avenged by the analysts they thought couldn't fight back. Because sometimes the casualty you're celebrating isn't dead. Sometimes she's crawling from the wreckage with your entire network's locations memorized, just waiting for darkness to start hunting you back. Sometimes the ghost isn't a story to scare people around campfires. Sometimes the ghost is real, carrying a rifle and your organization's complete intelligence files, and she's coming for everyone who thought killing her would be easy. They thought she was just another casualty. Then she taught them the difference between a casualty and a survivor who refuses to quit. And 1 year later, the ghost was still hunting.